Remember when a Saturday meant piling into the car after hockey or a trip to Zeller's and dinner was more than just a meal? Back then, Canadian restaurants weren't just places to eat, they were landmarks. From root beer mugs at Mother's Pizza to steak nights at Bonanza and muffins from MMMuffins, these spots were part of our everyday lives. Today, we're revisiting 6 legendary Canadian restaurants we wish were still around, a true taste of Canadian nostalgia. For Canadians who grew up in the 1990s and 2000s, walking into a Richtree market was unlike stepping into any other restaurant. It wasn't just a place to grab a bite, it felt like you were entering a European-style food hall right in the middle of downtown Toronto, Ottawa, or Mississauga. Bright stalls lined the space, each one buzzing with cooks whipping up fresh dishes right in front of you. The smell of sizzling stir-fries mixed with the scent of fresh-baked bread and rotisserie chicken. And everywhere you looked, there were plates piled high with colorful, market-fresh meals. What set Richtree apart was its unique dining style. You didn't just order from one counter and sit down. You wandered from station to station with a little card, choosing exactly what you wanted along the way. Maybe a slice of wood-fired pizza here, a bowl of steaming pasta there, or a pastry to finish things off. For Canadians used to fast food chains with standard menus, Richtree was fresh, fun, and just a little bit fancy. At its peak, Richtree had a flagship location at the Toronto Eaton Centre that was a must-visit for anyone spending the day downtown. It wasn't unusual to see a line of people clutching their cards, debating whether to grab sushi, schnitzel, or just head straight to dessert. The atmosphere was lively, casual, and cosmopolitan, reflecting the multicultural heartbeat of Canada's cities. But the concept wasn't built to last. Rising rents, high operating costs, and the shift toward trendier, fast casual dining chipped away at Richtree's success. By the late 2000s, only a handful of locations remained, and on March 9, 2020, the last Richtree closed its doors, a quiet ending that felt symbolic of a changing era. If you spent any time in a Canadian mall in the 80s or 90s, chances are you've still got the smell of MMMuffins burned into your memory. Launched in Toronto in 1979, the chain became a mall food court staple, selling oversized muffins in every flavor imaginable: blueberry, banana chocolate chip, carrot, even bran for the parents trying to eat healthy. For kids, it was the perfect treat after back-to-school shopping at Woolco or Sears, and for teens, it was fuel before catching a movie. What made MMMuffins feel so Canadian was how completely tied it was to mall culture. You couldn't wander through Eaton Centre or Scarborough Town Centre without passing that familiar sign and that unmistakable sweet aroma. The muffins themselves were huge, wrapped in that old-school parchment, and somehow always managed to taste homemade, even though you bought them in the middle of a bustling food court. Pair it with a coffee from the counter, and you basically had the Canadian mall experience in snack form. MMMuffins was never just about muffins either. It represented a time when food courts were less about global chains and more about comfort food. You didn't need Instagram-worthy presentation or flashy branding. You just needed a giant muffin that left crumbs everywhere and stuck to the bag. It was cozy, it was affordable, and it felt familiar. But like so many mall icons, MMMuffins couldn't hold out forever. As malls across Canada started to decline and food courts shifted toward international franchises, the chain began fading away. By the late 2000s, only a handful of locations remained, and eventually the ovens went cold for good. For many Canadians, the loss of MMMuffins wasn't just about muffins disappearing, it was about an entire era vanishing with it. The smell of fresh muffins wafting through the halls of your local mall was a small but meaningful part of growing up here. Today, mentioning MMMuffins instantly sparks nostalgia, a reminder of weekend mall trips, food court lunches, and a time when life felt a little simpler. Mother's Pizza Parlor and Spaghetti House was the kind of place where dinner felt like an occasion, not just a meal. Founded in Hamilton in 1970, it grew into a beloved chain across Ontario and beyond. With its Tiffany lamps, cozy booths, and those giant frosty mugs of root beer, Mother's delivered more than just pizza and pasta. It gave families a warm, almost ritualistic spot for birthdays, post-hockey celebrations, or just a night out. Every detail felt crafted to create memories, from the sparkler-topped desserts to the bottomless breadsticks. At its peak in the early 80s, Mother's had over 100 locations, but by the end of the decade, it was gone, swallowed up by corporate changes and competition. A revival was attempted in the 2010s, but it never recaptured the magic. What made Mother's stand out wasn't just the food, it was the atmosphere. Walking in felt like stepping into a cozy time capsule. The dim lighting, stained glass lamps, and checkered tablecloths all gave it a classic old-world charm. The kind of place where parents could relax while kids made towers out of breadsticks and dared each other to finish that massive sundae. It was also a gathering place. Teams came after winning or losing hockey games, grandparents celebrated anniversaries, and teens went on their very first dates. Mother's had that rare mix of affordability and charm, so everyone felt welcome, whether you were there for spaghetti and meatballs or just a root beer float. By the time the chain disappeared, it left behind more than empty storefronts. It left a gap in the way Canadians dined together. The revival decades later reminded everyone just how powerful nostalgia could be. But it also proved you can't truly recreate the magic of a place that belonged to a specific moment in time. For those who grew up with it, Mother's was woven into the fabric of their lives. The smell of bubbling lasagna, the sound of laughter bouncing off the booths, and the glow of those Tiffany lamps live on as cherished memories, long after the last Mother's sign came down. If you ever walked into a Licks in the 80s or 90s, you knew immediately it wasn't your typical burger joint. Born in Toronto in 1980, Licks made its name with big, juicy home burgers grilled right in front of you, served with fresh toppings and an energy you couldn't ignore. What really set Licks apart was the atmosphere. Staff were known for bursting into song, belting out pop hits while flipping burgers and scooping ice cream. For kids, it was dinner and a show. For teens, it was a hangout spot that felt cooler than the usual fast food chains. And for parents, it was quality you couldn't get at McDonald's or Burger King. Licks quickly became a Canadian success story, expanding across Ontario and even reaching into frozen grocery products with their famous burgers sold in supermarkets. The food was hearty, stacked high with toppings, and always made fresh. But people came as much for the vibe as the meals. The singing staff, the bright colors, and the playful slogans made every visit feel like an event. Licks leaned into Canadian identity too, proudly advertising their burgers as something homegrown and different from the American giants. By the late 90s and early 2000s, though, things started to change. Rents climbed, operations became harder to manage, and competition from bigger chains with faster service and sleeker branding chipped away at their following. Even the once beloved frozen burger line disappeared from grocery stores. By the 2000s, most Licks locations had closed their doors, leaving only memories of a time when grabbing a burger meant music, laughter, and a little bit of theater. For many Canadians, Licks was more than a pit stop for food. It was a place where personality mattered, where dining felt like entertainment, and where a burger chain managed to capture the energy of an era. The singing may have stopped, but the nostalgia still lingers, proof that sometimes the best meals are the ones that come with a story. Before steakhouses became upscale and expensive, Bonanza was the place where Canadian families went to feast without breaking the bank. Starting in the 1970s, Bonanza offered something almost unheard of at the time, an affordable steak dinner, complete with a legendary all-you-can-eat salad bar. For kids, it was an adventure, grabbing endless bread rolls and Jell-O cubes while parents lined up for their sirloin or T-bone. For small towns especially, Bonanza wasn't just a restaurant. It was the spot for birthday parties, team celebrations, and even date nights. There was something uniquely Canadian about piling into a booth after hockey practice and feeling like you were dining in style, even if your plate was loaded with salad and pudding. What people loved most was the mix of abundance and comfort. The salad bar had everything from cottage cheese to macaroni salad, and no one left hungry. For families on a budget, Bonanza was proof that dining out could still feel special without straining the wallet. The chain peaked in popularity during the late 70s and 80s, but over time, competition from fast casual dining, rising costs, and shifting tastes chipped away at its appeal. Younger diners leaned toward newer brands, and Bonanza's classic steak and buffet model began to feel dated. By the early 2000s, closures spread, and in 2010, the last Canadian Bonanza shut its doors for good. Still, for many Canadians, Bonanza represents an era when dining out meant family togetherness. The clatter of trays, the smell of sizzling steaks, the endless choices at the salad bar, these weren't luxuries, they were weekly rituals. Bonanza may be gone, but for those who grew up with it, the chain will always be remembered as the place where good food and good company came first. In the 1980s and early 90s, Bun Master was the go-to Canadian bakery cafe before chains like Tim Hortons expanded their menus. Founded in Toronto in 1979, it quickly grew into a national franchise with over 150 locations at its peak. The concept was simple but brilliant. Freshly baked bread, hearty sandwiches, soups, and treats, all served in a cozy, no-frills setting. It was the kind of place where office workers grabbed lunch, students filled up between classes, and families stopped in for warm bread straight out of the oven. Bun Master had that distinct Canadian practicality, good food, affordable prices, and a focus on freshness. Its sandwiches were piled high, the bread was warm and soft, and the soups had the kind of home-style quality that made a quick lunch feel satisfying. Some locations even sold loaves to take home, giving it a community bakery feel that set it apart from fast food. What made Bun Master stand out was its accessibility. You didn't need a special occasion to stop in. It was the everyday spot where people could count on value and quality without fuss. The branding wasn't flashy, but the steady crowds proved that reliability mattered. As the dining landscape shifted in the late 90s, bigger chains expanded aggressively, offering faster service, drive-thrus, and heavy advertising. Bun Master, with its slower, more traditional model, struggled to compete. Franchises closed steadily through the 2000s, and by the 2000s, the once busy bakeries had vanished from Canadian streets. For many, though, Bun Master remains tied to an era when eating out was simpler. It was the taste of a fresh turkey sandwich before a university lecture, the smell of bread, rolls on a cold winter afternoon, the comfort of a lunch that felt homemade. Today, it survives only in memory, a true Canadian original that disappeared too soon. And that wraps up our trip through the Canadian restaurants that time has left behind. If this nostalgic journey brought back memories of family dinners, mall hangouts, or special nights out, don't forget to give the video a like. Subscribe for more dives into Canada's history, culture, and the places that shaped our everyday lives. See you in the next one.